Welcome to the Casey Zavaleta podcast. This podcast is for those who are in pursuit of high performance and for those who are interested in living with intentionality. We'll explore the practices, habits, and mindsets that will help you to be better in your personal life and in your professional life. Your time and attention is a gift that I promise not to take for granted. Thank you for being here. Acclaimed speaker and award-winning entrepreneur Danny Goldberg built an 8-figure business before he turned 30 years old. Along the way, his desire to learn what makes great organizations great led him to spend nearly 10 years decoding exactly what it takes to be an effective leader of an effective organization. Danny's modern leadership framework gives leaders at all levels actionable insights that will help them foster depth, personalize their leadership approach, and lead in a way that inspires loyalty. As a speaker, Danny captivates audiences with his engaging and relatable style. Danny believes that when people thrive, businesses thrive, and is passionate about helping teams discover the power of care to attract and retain high-performance teams. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Danny this week.
No matter what your pursuits are, whether they're professional or personal, to actually accomplish something of significance, you need to do it with a certain level of intensity to actually go and achieve those things. So it's like this fine balance of being hyper intentional and being a high performer in what you do to actually achieve anything. And for leaders to understand that like those two actually are intersected and they go hand in hand to accomplish anything of meaning and significance.
People talk a lot about, it's that horrible word now, work-life balance. I think what you're getting at is that sometimes when you think of like this nice balanced field between my work life and my personal life, where's the intensity in that? When we think of high performance, we think of something where you're like all in, you're passionate about it, you have one focus, you're willing to like do whatever it takes. So what is the balance between those two things? How do you find the intensity? I think what the most important thing is it needs to be sustainable. So you can have like short bouts of high intensity where that's really the main thing that you're focused on. But how do you make high performance and performing in your life something that happens over decades, not just happens because you went balls to the wall for 6 months,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a good maybe way to view it is there's seasons, right? And there's times where we're very focused, very intense on something and on achieving something. And then we'll weave in and out of those moments of intensity and then still making space and time for the things that are important to you and finding some level of integration in how you go about living your life. But it is really tough because to achieve anything of significance, to actually make something happen, you need to pursue that thing with a high level of intensity. And, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, there was so much talk about like hustle culture. And at one time it was good, then it was bad, but you do need to bring some of that to the things that you want to achieve, to whatever your pursuits are. Otherwise, it's very hard to really achieve anything that is like truly meaningful and make change in your life. But I think just to go like one level backwards for the individual, I think what's really important is to define what success looks like in your life, and not just in your career or not just in your fitness goals. Try to define success holistically to understand what a successful life looks like to you. And then you can go in and look at the key areas of your life, family, friends, community, contribution, self, financial, career. Go into each of those buckets and try to actually define what success looks like in each of those buckets. Ask yourself, what does success look like to me in my family and in my relationships and in my career? And in really creating a well-defined life on your terms, then you could figure out like where to drive levels of intensity into those things. And when you want to pull back the lever to go into like gear 6 in business, and maybe then family will go into gear 4, but then, a recalibration where now family is going to be gear 6 and business is going to be, or career is going to be gear 5, something like that.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's about, to me, what I think about living with intentionality, it's about your focus, which is what you're speaking to, and that you're making choices purposefully. So this rings very true to me because, as you know, I had a baby 5 months ago. And so the gear that was like all the way up, the gear I was at 10 in, was family, because I was learning about what it means to be a mom. And I wanted that to be my sole focus. You know, I took time completely off of work where I wasn't touching anything. I wasn't pursuing anything in terms of speaking. And that was the season that I was in. And that was very purposeful. That didn't mean that I never wanted to return to work. But for that, 6 months or so, that was what I was purposely choosing. And then maybe now, as I lean in more to being back at work and I'm launching this podcast and I want to be getting it out to people, maybe the time that I get to spend with my son dials back a little bit. And so the quantity of time isn't the same. And I'm really pushing on driving something that feels exciting to me in terms of my career. So I don't think you want to be at like a 5. I like your gears. I don't think you want to be at a 5 in all areas at all times. Like, to me, that's mediocre and it's boring. But are you being intentional about what you're prioritizing when? And are you making sure that everything cycles through? So if it's always that you're in the 10th gear at work and you're never focusing on your health, your wellness, or you're never focusing on your connection and your relationships, well, over time, obviously, those things are going to get way out of whack. So yeah, to me, it's just about purposeful decisions in each area.
Yeah, I love that.
I want to talk a little bit about your background in business as well as your personal story. But you started your first business when you were 14 years old, which is pretty amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about that business? And I would love to know a little bit about why you felt like you could do that at 14. And the reason I say that is because I think most kids, like, they're not, in the back of their head, they're not like, yeah, I could start a business right now. They're thinking about their schoolwork. But like, why do you feel like that was a possibility to you and something that you said, yeah, I can do this?
Yeah, well, schoolwork definitely was not a focus, unfortunately, when I was 14. That was tough for me. But so when I was 11 years old, I stumbled into the boxing gym for the first time. I was a little bit chubby and I was like a little bit self-conscious. And I was 11 years old and my mom was like, you should go to the gym and, maybe it'll help build my confidence. So I went into the gym and I met this trainer, Val, and there was a personal training gym and then there was a boxing gym down the block where he also taught. And when I went into the gym at 11, we started working out together. And eventually he was like, you should try boxing. So I walked down the block. I walked into that gym. And the second I stepped foot in there, I fell in love instantly. And there was something just about the sport. Like, I loved the art, the dance to it, the punching, the weaving, the bobbing, and the competitive drive of it is so much like you versus you when you go into the boxing ring. So I fell in love with the sport, and 11-year-old me had the aspiration to one day become a fighter, and the gym became my second home. Every day after school, I'd go to the gym, and eventually when I was 14, I started working at the local gym, and boxing was very much my life. So one day I was sitting in my backyard with my dad, and we're talking about life, just shooting the breeze, and I turned to him and I said, hey, Dad, how do I build something great in life? My dad was an industrial designer, and he loved to design and build things, and he thought for a moment, and he said, find what you love and you'll build something amazing. And at that time, like, the answer was so clear. I love boxing. It was my life. So I said, let's sell boxing gloves. I was already working at the gym part-time, nothing glamorous. I wasn't a trainer or anything. I was literally like scrubbing the windows, cleaning the toilet, vacuuming in between classes. And
yeah, you're 14.
Yes. And I said, let's sell boxing gloves. And he started digging in further with more questions. And 15 minutes later, I had a business plan and a dream. And 2 weeks later, we had a company name, a logo, and I pulled together my savings from working at the gym, and he gave me a small loan, and we had ordered some boxing equipment from a manufacturer overseas. That was the beginning. And then my parents would drive me from gym to gym on the weekends, selling the boxing gloves. And I used to joke with them, and I'd say, like, I'll call you when the bag is empty. When the boxing bag is empty with all the equipment, I'll call you. And that was the beginning of the business. And little by little, it grew, and it went from serving like local gyms within the community to gyms all over Long Island to gyms all over New York to gyms all over the country. I continued that through high school and into college. And in college, Inc. magazine selected us as one of the coolest college startups. And another brand was just starting in the MMA space. They reached out to me, and they were starting a jockstrap business, developing the world's most protected athletic cup for MMA fighters. They wanted to partner with me because I had all this distribution. So in college, I ended up starting another business with them where we developed this product called Diamond MMA. Joe Rogan got a hold of the cup and loved it. And during a live UFC event, a fighter got kicked in the groin and he gave us a 30-second commercial, and the business took off that way. So in college, I balanced like these two businesses that we're building. Both businesses continue to evolve and grow. But to go back to your question, like what gave me the courage to even pursue it at 14? I think at the time, I was very curious. And similarly to the intensity that I brought to trying to learn the sport of boxing, when I started business, there was a certain level of curiosity of what could be possible. But also there was this intensity around like this was the most fun sport I've ever played in my life. And at the time, like building a business wasn't like today. You can go online and within 30 days you could probably launch a Shopify store and sell products online. There wasn't Shopify. There wasn't 3PLs. We store the product in my garage and eventually moved it into a like local storage unit where we'd store the equipment and we'd have to go there to pick up orders. And but there was like this. It was an adventure. It was the most exciting thing because everything was just like we got to launch the website. We have to go find fighters who want to wear the equipment. I remember how my phone, like in high school, I remember getting dings in the middle of the night that I'd get orders or I'd have to be up late to talk to the manufacturer. So like it was the coolest, craziest high school adventure. Wouldn't trade it for the world. I think it was more fun than like hanging out with my friends, playing video games, chasing girls. Like it was the most fun thing. And I think still to this day, I still view entrepreneurship very much that way of there's a great level of play to it. I think at the time, the stakes were so low. I don't remember. We bought a couple $1,000s of equipment. So at the time, I thought like, wow, that's a lot of money for a 14-year-old kid. But look, in hindsight, I look at that and I say, like, what a low stakes environment. I think every high schooler that has some curiosity around business or entrepreneurship, start a business, something local, because you don't know how it can evolve. And like there was that level of play that I brought to the business.
It sounds like entrepreneurship was just in your nature. I mean, even in the question that you asked your dad, how do I build something great? Like you were already thinking about things beyond yourself and impacting others. And I think that's quite unique at such a young age. Do you have any idea? Do you think that was just innate? Like, do you think you're just born with that? Or do you think like your parents helped cultivate something that allowed for that to be possible?
Yeah. So my dad was a very creative person. He was an industrial designer and he loved to design furniture. I feel like that's kind of the cliche thing that all industrial designers love to design, but he loved to design furniture. And he would always tell me stories growing up about his own professional pursuits and dreams of starting his own business. And after graduating from grad school, he had started his own agency as an industrial designer, helping brands design innovative, cool products. And eventually his largest customer, who hired him as a consultant, told him, look, we're going to hire someone for this role in-house and we want it to be you. But if you don't accept it, we're going to end our business relationship together because we're hiring in-house for this. And at the time, my oldest sister was born. And I guess he weighed like the pros and cons of putting his business on pause and getting a full-time job versus saying no to the full-time job and pursuing his business further. And he ended up choosing to go and get a job to stay with this company. And he always thought like one day he'd get back to building his own business, but he never had the chance. And growing up, he'd always tell me these stories about him building his business and putting it on pause. But in his heart of hearts, I don't think he ever regretted that move, but he always thought of the possibility of what could have been. Yeah. And I think that left a really big impression in my life around the importance of pursuing the things that are most important to me. That, it's so easy, especially now at 30, I see how easy it is to choose the safer route, to say, okay, I need to put my pursuits on pause because I have bills to pay, I want to start a family, or I just started a family, or I have financial obligation, responsibility, and I need to have a job, and it might not be the exact thing I want, or it might not be my dream of dreams, but I need to go and play it safer or do the responsible thing. And I see how easy that is. And there's nothing wrong if that's like what you actually desire. But going back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning around being hyper intentional, I think that made me be hyper intentional around asking myself, what is important to me? What are the things that I deeply care about? How and where do I want to spend my time? And at the time, like I wanted to spend it in boxing gyms with boxers. And I had this beautiful medium or platform that I was building in my business to harness and focus that. I think with having the last name Goldberg, the odds of becoming a professional aspiring boxer were probably slim to none. So I think the business was a way better pursuit ultimately. And I had a dear friend who was a professional boxer, who was Jewish professional boxer. And I did a photo shoot with him early on into the business. And I told him like, I loved boxing. And he's like, do you spar? And I told him that I was competing a little bit. And he said, listen, like just as a professional in this space, I'm telling you, if you don't see yourself becoming a world champion, this isn't a sport to play. It's not a sport to dabble because the consequences are so high of getting hit in the head repetitively. And really like that shaped me from that one conversation. I kind of hung up the gloves and was like, cool, I'll just focus on the business, but I still love the sport.
Wow. Do you still box?
Yeah, but just like for fun. I don't spar anymore. So, like I used like maybe. Yeah, exactly. Like maybe 2 years ago, I'd still go into spar here and there, but I have to preserve my brain.
That's fair. I know.
Yeah.
It is such a dangerous sport. Yeah. It sounds like you had a pretty awesome relationship with your dad. Now, obviously, such a massive part of your story is that you lost both of your parents tragically to each had a separate cancer diagnosis, and they were both gone before you were 25. Huge, like way more than any young person should have to go through. Can you tell us about that experience and how you survived it? Like, how did you come out on the other side of that?
Yeah. So my dad died when I was 20. I was started at a different college, transferred to Syracuse going into my junior year. The college that I originally started at, I knew pretty much the day that I got there that I didn't want to be there anymore. I knew that it wasn't the college I wanted to be at. And I threw in an application to Syracuse, got rejected, and was like, great, I'm going to be stuck here for the next 4 years. And I had to work really hard to get out of there. And like school was never the thing that I excelled in. So
you were too busy building awesome businesses. It's hard to do both.
Yes, there were other distractions for sure. So I worked really hard. My parents dropped me off in August, and October was Parents' Weekend. And when my dad came up, he looked sick. He was skinnier than usual. My dad was a fat man, and he was now like skinny, pale, and he just looked sick. And he said he wasn't feeling too well, so they cut the trip short and they headed home. Only instead of going home, they went to the hospital. And about a week later, he called me, letting me know that he'd been diagnosed with cancer. And at the time, he promised he'd be okay. And every time I come home from school, he was weaker, sicker. And 7 months later, he passed away. And I'd say after he died, for me, what became my focus was work. I threw myself into my business. At the time, I had these two businesses that were growing, the box glove business, the jockstrap business. And I viewed business as a means to help my mom, to provide for my mom, to kind of try to fill the role that my dad played. All I wanted to do was get out of school. I wanted to drop out so badly, to just go home, work on my business, because I viewed it as a means to something greater than the situation I was in. Long story short, I ended up staying in school. I graduated, and after college, I ended up selling the boxing glove business. I ended up leaving the jockstrap business, and ultimately, I started a manufacturing agency helping companies manufacture products. There were some parallels to the work that my dad did, and that felt really great. Like it was healing in some ways. I felt like I was like reliving or continuing on his legacy in his life, and I threw myself into that business so hardcore. At the beginning, we talked about the levers, and probably at that time, if you asked me, family would have been probably a 1, even though like the focus was I want to help my mom. I was like gear 6 in business and gear 0 for all other facets of my life.
Yeah.
And my new business really took off. We helped consumer brands manufacture products, and we ended up helping Gravity Blankets manufacture their product. And for those that don't know, they were one of the top 20 Kickstarter campaigns of all time. They raised like close to $5 million in 30 days. And that was like just like an explosive catalyst in my business. And I felt like I was on top of the world for so long. And there were elements of the business that I really loved. But when my mom was diagnosed about 5 years after my dad died in October. And when she was diagnosed, my life came to a screeching halt and everything changed. And it was probably the first time in 5 years that I started to ask myself the hard questions. Like, what's the point of building this business? There's so much more to life, and life can be taken from you in a second. And I started to really recognize the fragility in life, that each day alive is a gift, not a guarantee. And I really became aware that I'm missing so much of life just focusing on my business. My mom's sickness was very different than my dad. My dad was sick for 7 months. And I was away for most of it in college, and I'd come home and I'd see that he was sick. My mom, the day she checked into the hospital, she never checked out. She had complication after complication, and it was brutal to watch someone you love suffer and to sit there knowing you can't do anything to change the outcome. It was brutal. And in the moment, I probably didn't realize it, but now looking back, I say, like, how could someone live through that and ever return back to their work, their business, their career, and ever be expected to have the same relationship to work, career, life? Impossible. So it was through that like my life changed almost in an instant, and I realized I had to make some serious changes because I was missing out on life as I just pursued this business. And my mom getting sick was probably one of the biggest, without a doubt, like the biggest catalyst in my life for change, and both personal and professional, for like the life I'm living now as a result.
Can you paint a picture for me? What was it like before when you were working in the business? Was it just like long hours, high stress, like not much time off? You're really just like grinding every day. Like what did you feel like you were missing while you were doing that?
At the time, like if you asked me, I probably wouldn't have said I was missing out on anything, because I felt like I was being intentional in my choice in pursuing the business. But it was after that she was diagnosed, I realized there's so much more to life than just my career. And my career is a bucket. It's not my entire life. I realized I wanted to not just be pursuing profits, which was very much a big driver of me early on in my 20s. I wanted to have an impact, make a difference. And I wanted to start to like make space for my life. At the time, there was this woman, Emily, who would go on to become my wife. Like, I had feelings for her for years, and I was just kind of like kicking the can down the road, saying someday I'll get to it. And I was like, I need to tell her how I feel, because life is fragile, and I need to go on trips with my friends because life is short. And I need to do more than just my career, because life is so much richer when we start to fill the buckets that are important to us. There are many things that make us uniquely who we are. And it's so important to make the space and time to honor those things so we can live like a truly rich and fulfilling life. So those were the things that I had the awareness of after my mom was sick.
Yeah. How do you help people who haven't gone through, like, I think that grief changes you and a loss changes you. How do you help people that maybe haven't had that experience to understand just how precious every single day that we have is?
I think stories are powerful. I think it certainly can help. I think living through hard things in general, whether they're manufactured or not, can be a catalyst for figuring out how and where you want to spend your time. Admittedly, like, I don't know how you do it without living through something hard. And it doesn't need to be necessarily the loss of a loved one. Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's you have you're so burnt out with work and you realize, like, gosh, I need to make a change. I think there are those moments, there are those pivotal moments in our life. But I think one thing that anyone who's listening to this can do to help them is sit with and ask themselves the hard questions. And what I mean by the hard questions is like the introspective questions that make you uniquely who you are. I've always found it fascinating that the question that I started to ask myself after my mom died was, knowing that my time is limited, knowing tomorrow is not guaranteed, how and where do I want to spend my limited time? And not just in my career, but in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that like that can be such a powerful and profound question, but so often in our life, we never take the time, we never take like that beat to think about, is this the life I want to live? Is this the life I want to build? Am I enjoying the thing that I'm going to go and do, or that I'm committing to doing today, next month, next year? We're not taught to think about that in college or in high school. You know, we're taught, we go to high school, we go to college, we choose a major, we get a job, and that's the pursuit. And I think when we're asked to like dream a little bit and leave aside all the schooling and just focus on how and where you want to spend your time, you might learn things about yourself that maybe you didn't think about, or maybe ways that you actually want to spend your time, and you get this moment of clarity where, cool, I don't care that my mom was an accountant and my parents want me to go become an accountant. I want to go do X, Y, Z, and that's the thing I'm going to pursue. Or I don't care that everyone else goes and gets a job after college. I want to spend the next 2 years traveling, and I'm going to make enough money to get by so I can travel and see the world. Like, there are questions that we can ask ourselves to become more aware of how and where we want to spend our time. And that changes as we navigate life, as we live through things, and as we get older, like our own priorities shift, and how you want to spend your time will shift, just like, you know, you starting a family and shifting in and out of what's important to you as a result.
It's amazing how we don't even consider that type of question. Often we just end up on this hamster wheel where we do the next logical thing in life. We take the next step, we get the next, degree, and then we go into the job, and we never actually pause and say, is this what I wanted? Does this life line up with the way that I want to be spending my time? And does it allow me to have the family life that I want, the experiences that I want? So I think it's incredibly powerful to remind people that, like, you can ask yourself those questions, and it is up to you to make changes if things aren't in a line with, the way that you want to be living your life.
100%. And I think it's important to know, like, that regardless of where you end up in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you can always make the changes you want. I think as you get older, it becomes exponentially harder because you have more obligation, you have less time, because lots of people do start families and lots of people have more financial obligation. So, going back to my pursuits in high school, like, there really is this magical moment in time from, I'd say, high school to, let's say, throughout your 20s, where you can pursue so much of the things you want that are so low risk. If you maybe get off the hamster wheel, or the idea that what your teacher told you to do, or what your aunt tells you to do, or what your uncle tells you to do, or your dad, mom, etc. Like, you can decide what you want to go and do, and go and try a bunch of different things early on in your career and figure out the things that make you come alive. And, if you do start a family, or if you have more financial obligation, you can still make the change, but it's going to be naturally harder because you'll just have more obligation, but it's still possible.
Yeah, it's still never too late. It's interesting as we talk about this is bringing up memories of my experience through high school and college. I really liked science and I really liked math. And so I pursued pre-med in undergrad, and I thought I would be a doctor or a pharmacist or something along those lines was what I always pictured for myself. But I did not give 1 second of thought to what that lifestyle looked like. I was like, I'm interested in these things, and, I'm getting good grades. And that'll be a stable job. It'll pay well. So that's just what will make sense for me to do. And not once did I think, do I want to be on call, or do I want to be going into a hospital every day? Or even what type of doctor could I be that would allow me to also have a family? None of that crossed my mind at all. And it just was kind of by a fluke that it didn't work out. Now I look back and I think, thank goodness it didn't work out, because I don't think that lifestyle would have made me happy. I think it would have burned me right out. Anyways, it's so interesting to think about how it's just not baked into the system to like pause and consider some of those things. And also as a young person, you don't know. It's hard to know what's going to be important to me once I, have a family, I'm married and I have a kid. Like,
Yes,
it's almost
100%.
impossible to actually know that. But yeah, it's crazy to think back on.
Yeah, that's why I'm always I'm like fascinated by people in their early 20s or late teens that are like, I'm gonna go do X, Y, Z, and
Yeah.
they say it with like such conviction. And there obviously are the people that go the doctor route and they continue down that path. But like, it is so hard to know in your 20s what you actually want to do because you just haven't experienced the things yet to know that it's for you. I think personally, like, and I say this all the time, but your 20s is the greatest time to go and be an explorer. Like, put your explorer cap on and go and try everything and anything that you can get your hands on to just validate if you actually enjoy it. I think the idea of like having to choose a major, it creates this pressure of like, this is the path I'm on and now I need to continue. And I just spent 4 years or 6 years or 8 years doing this thing. I feel dead on the inside, but I spent a decade doing this and I got to continue. It's crazy to me, like, and going back to, going back to my mom being sick, I think that that's where loss can be such a powerful teacher because if I delay the things I want anymore, there's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to pursue those things in a year or 5 years or 10 years. The time is now to like take the chance, take the risk, do the thing, ask the girl out, pursue the new business, because after my mom had passed, I knew I wanted to leave my business. And I built a really great small business. I had a team in Hong Kong, an office there, even liked what I did. But I started to want to do more impactful work. And I started up my own podcast, sharing like stories of people, sharing their own stories of living intentionally. And as a result, I realized like the business was no longer the thing that was serving me. And for almost 3 years, I wrestled with this idea of, do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay? Do I go? And I ultimately decided to leave, but it was probably one of the hardest decisions of my life. But I decided at 29 to literally go back to a blank canvas slate, pursue an entirely new, different career path, one that now is like bringing me so much energy and excitement and adventure that I didn't have anymore in my business, because I said to wake up for the next 40 years of my life to pursue something that no longer fulfills my soul, like that is like what a loss that would be, what a miss that would be. So yeah. I think that that's where loss can be an incredibly powerful teacher, because you come face to face with your own mortality and recognize that our time on earth truly is limited.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said you grapple with that for 3 years, because I feel like I see people all the time that like deep down in their heart, they know that they need to make a change and they know that they should leave, like to feel more fulfilled and to feel more purposeful and happier. But people drag their feet a lot. Why do you think that happens? Why do you think it takes people so long and they get so stuck in certain situations? Is it fear of the change and fear of the uncertainty, or what, from your perspective, if you think back on that 3 years, like what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is fear driven. I think the unknown is terrifying for so many, including myself, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think for me, like the idea of doing the same thing over and over and knowing it wasn't going to fulfill me, that was more painful than the potential or the possibility of the new dream of speaking in corporate development not working out. That was less scary to me. But I think that so often, it is admittedly, it is terrifying. I think especially like the further you go down a career path, the more scary that change is, because this is all I know. This is where my contacts are. This is how I provide for my family, put food on the table. Like the stakes are so much higher of leaving behind something that's stable, secure, that you know. So I think for so many, the first step is the scariest step. But I do think, like, to combat it, there are so many ways that people can take a baby step before like going all in. I don't think most people should burn the boats and leave it all behind. I think that that's crazy advice. And in some ways that honestly.
Good to know. Good to know because people talk like that. I think this is really important. This is the nuance in the situation, right? It's not like the second that you wake up and you think, I don't think this job is fulfilling me, like go put in your 2 weeks notice. It's different than that, right?
Yeah. I'd say everyone's situation is unique to their own, right? Some people, maybe they have more financial security. They can afford taking a bigger risk. But I think for most people, the right thing to do is to get hyper intentional around how and where you want to spend your time, get clear on the changes you want to make, and without disrupting your existing life over here, take a baby step in the right direction and see, collect data and see, experiment and see, is this working? And if it works, cool, lean a little more into it. It's a fine art and science of when's the right time to leave behind an old career to pursue a new thing. But I think there are so many ways that people can take that first step. I'll just use this as the example, and it didn't go into anything besides stories and experience. But my wife for a long time talked about her desire to want to get involved in the food business. She thought it was an interesting space to be in. She came from an ad sales world, from a big organization. So besides being passionate about cooking and liking eating food, she didn't really know anything about the food business. So she ended up doing a couple nights working at a restaurant. She had the opportunity, jumped at it. Then she ended up baking cookies and selling them at the local farmers market. And she started a business, and she would do this it was every weekend for however long the farmers market was going on. And she did it for almost a year, consistently. And, she learned a lot about the business side of running a small business. And someone might view that as that's a passion project, but there are so many different ways that could have unfolded. It could have unfolded as everyone's buying them and she's going to now go and open a bakery. It could have unfolded into, I really like baking, but I hate running a business. I'm happy I didn't leave my job yet. So there are ways that you can run a personal experiment to just figure out if your hunch is correct before you go and, disrupt your entire life.
Yeah. Danny, tell us about what you're doing now. What is the thing that's lighting you up and fulfilling you at this point?
I've been pursuing professional speaking. So you and I obviously met at Heroic Public Speaking. And since then, I've just been pursuing speaking full time. I'm working with leaders, leadership teams, HR professionals, helping them understand and learn the power of building with care and leading with care and the infinite ROI of how leading with care leads to higher levels of engagement and retention in the workplace. And I'm trying to use my story and other people's stories to help leaders understand that there's a real ROI when they lead their teams and organizations with care. And I'm now finally starting to see some traction of getting on stages, working with organizations, and I'm stoked about that. And the byproduct, as an aside from the work I'm doing within organizations, I feel so many people can learn from my own story. I am someone who built his own business, ran it successfully. It was a profitable small business. And I decided to leave behind a good thing to pursue an entirely different path because it wasn't the thing that was fulfilling to me anymore. And I try to share the behind the scenes on my LinkedIn of building this new business and to show that it's not easy. It is extremely difficult to go about building this business where I don't have contacts in this world. This isn't the thing that I grew up doing. It's very different from the other businesses that I've created in the past that were all product based. Right. And, I hope someone can see my story and realize cool, I've been doing the same thing for 20 years and I can also make the changes in my life and I can pursue the things that are important to me. And just hope that I can be a source of inspiration for others that are wanting to make changes in their life.
It's crazy how much experience you have in business at such a young age. It's almost like your wisdom and your experience is well beyond your years. I kind of want to dig in a little bit to the things that you're talking about and sharing with leaders. You're talking about creating a culture of care and how that leads to a greater return when leaders are investing in their people. Can you just explain to us what exactly does that look like in practice? What does it mean to create a culture of care? Or I think you also say like a more human workplace, which I love that phrase.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we need to go backwards just to understand how much work has changed over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I think post-COVID, for so many, like similarly to my own experience in losing my parents, so many people had a pause in their own life where they started to ask themselves perhaps some of the hard questions around how and where do I want to spend my time? And wow, the life that I was living is so precious. And I think as a result of that, the way people show up to work, how, where, and what we work on has just fundamentally changed. And I think for organizations to thrive, not just in the future of work, but also like in work today, they need to understand that people are coming to work completely differently today than they were only 5 years ago. And what that looks like for organizations and leaders to understand is that, one, people have more optionality than ever before. 5 years ago, remote work wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Hybrid work wasn't a thing. So you were confined to the location you live to go and get a job. So you had much more limited options. Today, you can work virtually anywhere for almost all organizations. So I think there's been this shift where people today have more power than the organization. A job is no longer viewed as this privilege to have, but rather it's cool. I'm going to go and find the right organization, the right leadership, the right job for me, because if it's not here, there's so many other places I can go and work. And I really believe that for leaders to build thriving organizations, they need to, one, understand that shift, and two, understand the recipe or the secret sauce to really engage their workforce. It's not just through salary alone anymore. It's not through these perks that we used to throw at employee engagement, like creating fun happy hours, or we have slides in our office, or we have Legos for you to come in and play with. These like cool office perks that really they worked at some point. They did work at some point to create, a level of engagement, but they're just no longer effective anymore. And there's so much data to support the one thing that people want across the board, regardless of generation. The one thing that all people want is they want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be supported, and not just in building their career, but they want to be supported in building a life. And I think that that's like probably one of the biggest things. 5 years ago, so many people built their life around their career.
Yeah.
But today, more and more people are building their career around their life. And just going back full circle, this idea of holistic success, I think so many more people understand they have more options than ever before. They understand that there's so much more to their life than just their career. And as a result, the way organizations have to lead those people is differently than it was 5 years ago. So today I'm helping leaders understand that through caring about their people, through showing up and supporting their people holistically, there's this beautiful synergy that can happen. And in doing so, in leading with care and in supporting people to build their life, that's the answer to making sure people never want to leave, that they come to work highly engaged, excited, regardless of generation, regardless of remote, hybrid, or in person. That's the one thing that all people want. They want to be cared for.
Yeah. It is so interesting how many people are able to work remote now, and how many places, like my dad went into the office for, I don't know, decades, right? Like 9 to 5 every single day. And since COVID, he's now been in this hybrid environment where he can work from home, and it's just this like completely changed thing. But he has also commented on how the dynamic changes. It does open the door for people being able to put themselves first a little bit and say, you know what, I'm going to exercise this flexibility that I have, and I'm going to also prioritize the other things that are going on in my life as I work. Maybe I'm going to work from, like, he goes down to Naples, Florida, and I'll work from there. And, that's something that was like never possible before for so many years in his career. But you can feel less connected to your team, and you can feel less connected to management. That nothing like, I love working remote, but I also very much crave and love an in-person interaction. And I think that's part of the reason why HPS was so powerful. It was like so much in-person time. And I feel like we made really strong connections with the people in the group because we're there and we're present. And that's kind of unique nowadays. So how do you think that even when people are working remotely, they stay, like, how do you keep people engaged and connected? You're talking about, leaders putting the human first. Does that look like specific kinds of conversations that are had where the leader like really sees the person? Do you think it's in-person engagements once a quarter with the team? Like, what does that look like? Because I feel like that's the thing that most organizations have not solved for yet, but they're going to need to if we continue in this remote/hybrid environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So one, remote and hybrid work is here to stay. That's not going anywhere. The thing that organizations need to think about, they need to be hyper intentional around their time when they are together. So, if companies are putting together a hybrid work environment where their people are going to come into the office, let's say twice a week, no one now wants to commute, 1 hour each way to come to an office to do the same thing that they could have done at home. So, companies, so companies need to be more intentional around the time together that they're spending in an office or at a retreat to create those moments of togetherness, to create those moments that you would have had maybe more naturally or organically in an office 5 years ago, those moments of connection. So companies need to be more intentional around the time that they're spending together in the office.
Yeah, I think that's great insight. You don't want to go into a space where you had to physically be there and be like, I could have done that from my office at home. What is the difference and how do you create a different type of meeting, a different type of interaction? Yeah, I think that's super insightful. Danny, based on your experience in businesses, you've seen different businesses, different types of businesses, you've consulted with different businesses. What are your top three musts for a successful business? Across the board, you have to have these three things.
Yeah, I think very interesting question. I think number one, I'd say, is know your numbers. I've seen so many businesses fail over the last 10 years of building businesses because the numbers didn't work or because the business owner or owners didn't actually know their numbers. They're selling a lot of product, but they don't realize their costs are through the roof. So, know your numbers, build a financially sound business, I'd say is probably number two. Like from the beginning, don't hope that someday the numbers will work. Make a plan from day one to actually turn a profit and see that path is very clear.
Nice.
And number three, I'd say, is probably solve a real problem for those you serve. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate like the building of a business in the sense of sometimes when people are first starting about like taking that first step, they think they need to go and do all these things. They need to have the perfect website, the perfect marketing collateral, all those things. But in reality, I've started so many businesses because I found one customer that had one problem that I could solve, and that my solution and the cost of solving it and my solution, I was able to make a spread on that. So I think that like at a baseline, find one person to help them solve their problem. And then once you do, find another. That's like the easiest way, I think, to go about building a business.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Casey Zavaleta podcast. If you are organizing an event that's oriented around health and wellness, or you're booking corporate wellness sessions for your company, and you're interested in having me come and speak at that event, please reach out at caseyzavaleta.com/contact. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, I would hugely appreciate if you could take 10 seconds and leave a 5-star rating on the show. I would even more hugely appreciate if you could take 30 seconds and leave a quick review on the show. It helps to spread the word to more listeners about the podcast. If you would like to receive notifications about episode drops, or if you're interested in actionable insights related to podcast content, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter. You can do that at caseyzavaleta.com/subscribe. Okay, everyone, that's it from me this week. Thanks so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you back next Wednesday for the next episode of the show.